So, what I'd like to hear your opinion on is for innovators who are new in the space, how do they make sure that they are mapping out all the stakeholders and relevant people in the healthcare value chain?
And I think for innovators, it depends, right? If you're highly technical, one of the most important things you can do is get out and start talking to patients and clinicians. So again, assuming it's a clinically oriented solution, ultimately having early conversations with people outside of your technical expertise, understanding the patient journey. So, whether that's through connections you have, or reaching out to groups such as Digitalis Commons to get those introductions, really understanding walking a day in the life of patients and how they, or in the case of healthcare workers, what is that experience like? And those numbers need to probably be in the orders of 10 to 15 conversations early on to really make sure that what you're proposing from a technical and innovation perspective resonates with those different journeys and stakeholders early on.
Yeah, the thing that I would add to that also, and again, given that I spend so much time in academic tech transfer, if you're an innovator in a if you're an innovator within an academic institution, the first thing is always to talk to your tech transfer office. And the reason for that also is because although Tracy's comments are exactly right, you need to be talking to as many people as you can to get input. You need to make sure you're also doing it in a way that protects your intellectual property, to making sure that you understand what you can say and what you shouldn't say in order to make sure that that intellectual property, to the extent that it needs to be protected, remains protected. And that's the sort of a first step. And I think if you're an innovator outside of an academic institution, just make sure you're getting IP counsel first and guidance on what you can and can't and shouldn't say when you're having those conversations. Um, and I think when you have those conversations, I think it's really easy, if I come up with some brilliant idea, to think that I know the answer, I know the solution. I think it's really important when having those conversations to come from a place of curiosity, come from a place of skepticism about whether what I have in my head is actually the right solution, and really think through what are the actual needs that these stakeholders have, and that hopefully will help you iterate on it and give you some learning rather than trying to validate your sort of perceived idea of what is.
I think that's exactly right, Justin. I think asking specifically, I mean, again, I think people are inclined to be supportive when you're curious and asking questions, but ask the interviewers, the people you're trying to get information from, what concerns them, what haven't I asked? Because that vulnerability can be very insightful and informative as well.
Yeah.
Now, when you're getting that type of feedback and you're having those types of conversations, you're looking at the stakeholders. What are some signs that maybe the person that you're talking to or the stakeholder group that you're talking to is an end user, but not the buyer?
That's easy, you ask. So it can always be uncomfortable to sort of ask, would you purchase? So I think it's rare in a health system that nurses or physicians are the buyers, right? But as you get to departments and into these other groups, um, you simply would ask, how would a solution like this get adopted? Who needs to approve this solution? And start to unravel that, because sometimes approvals can happen in one area, but finance and payment happens in a different area, like procurement. There may be committees to think about. So I think also, if you can ask, are there other technologies like this, maybe in a different department or another analog, that have been adopted, and how did that happen? But too often we focus on only the impact or the clinical or the technical breakthrough, and not asking those early questions of, how does this actually get to patients? Who needs to be involved? And trying to speak to people in those roles. It's uncomfortable, but it's really good, I think, to pressure test the capacity for someone to raise their hand and say, yes, I think, we would take this through procurement. This is how it would happen. These are two or three other things we've adopted under that model that you can kind of point to.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have nothing to add. I totally agree.